everyone. So in this video, what we are going to do is actually the first thing I'm going to demonstrate you how we can create a user in ServiceNow and as well in Code365, which is my website, which has a MySQL database. Okay, so we do have here a registration form. Once I complete this form, click on register. It's going to have a user in ServiceNow and as well it's going to insert some data into the MySQL database. So let me first show you the user that I'm going to create. I'm going to check if that user is existing user or not. So I'm going to go right here. So this is the user table and I'm going to create a user with the following ID, Wayne D, for example. So I'm going to search here. As you can see here, it's completely empty. I do not have any user created with this user ID. So I'm going to do the same thing for the table that I have for the website. So I do have a database. The database name is Code365 and I have a person table. And as you can see here, I have certain columns, first name, last name, user ID, email, and password, but it's completely empty. There is no row or record inserted in here. So let's try now to complete the form. So I'm gonna have here Wayne D. The first name is going to be Wayne. The last name is going to be Dyer. I'm gonna have Wayne D at, let's put this, and the password I'm gonna have this one. Okay, let's click on register. Let's wait a bit. I do not have any messages, any pop-up, but we can check now in the user table. I'm gonna check if there's something. As you can see here, I do have a user created. So these are the information that we have just entered into the form. So I have the user ID, the first name, last name, email, and so on. So let's check now if I have something into the database, which I have for the website. So let's click on person table and see if is there something. Yeah, if I have something. So as you can see here, I have exactly the same information. So at this point, we do have only one single entry point, but the data is inserted in two different databases. One in ServiceNow and the other one is in Code365, which is my website. So how we can make this thing happen? So let's see a little bit what we have behind this form. What is the architecture? So let me click here. So these are the different features of let's say of the app or the registration form what we have behind which is allowing us or to create the user in two places at a time. Okay, the first thing, I have a client script which is going to call the table API of ServiceNow, and the client script have all the data necessary, which means the first name, last name, user ID, and so on. So it's going to send these information to the table API to create a user record in the sys user table. This is the reason why I have this record in here as at first point. Like the first thing that is what we are doing. We are creating a user in ServiceNow. That is the first step, and after that we are I'm having in ServiceNow a flow. The flow which is triggering whenever a user is created in the sysuser table, you're gonna trigger that flow, and that flow have a specific action step. So in this, the way we did, we called from the client script. We did an inbound integration. We made a REST call to the table API, and then we created a user. And in here, once we have the user record all the information right here, what we are trying to achieve here is to send an outbound integration, send a REST request to Code365 API where I have, as we have a table API, I do have another API which is create user API, which is created for this website specifically written in PHP, and I'm sending all the data to this API which will be creating the user. I mean, you will be inserting the data into the MySQL database. This is the whole thing behind what's happening when I'm clicking on the registration form. So let's see now how we can create the flow, how we can create what we can do, how we can do the outbound integration, and how we can create the flow in the flow designer in order to be triggered whenever a user is created. Okay, so that is the part mainly we can work on ServiceNow. These are the things that it is a little bit out of scope. So these are the user APIs written in PHP language, and this one we already saw in previous videos how we can make inbound integration in a external client script with the JavaScript language and to call ServiceNow API such as Stable API or any other API. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing, I'm going to create an action. So make sure that you go to Flow Designer, click on New, click on Action, and I'm gonna put here C365 create user. Okay, so this is the action. The first thing, I'm gonna have all the inputs. So I'm gonna have user ID. Okay, I'm gonna have first name. I'm gonna have last name. I'm gonna have email, and I'm gonna have password. Okay, these are the things that I have. Great. Now we're gonna create a payload. So I'm gonna send the request in the request body, which will have the payload. So all this information, the user ID, first name, last name, email, password, it will be in a payload. So I'm going to create a payload. So this is a payload builder, and the first one is going to be the user ID. So I'm going to just drag and drop the data build that I have already here in the input variable. So whatever the value that I'm going to enter in the beginning, so will be stored in the payload with this name value pair. So user ID will have the value that we're going to enter in the beginning. So if I click on test, you can see here I have all the forms, the value that I'm going to put right here. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of the input. So here I'm going to have first name, drop this one. I'm going to have last name. Okay, I'm going to have email. Password. Right, so we have done this part, and now we're gonna make a request, a REST outbound request. So I'm going here, integration, REST. Make sure you choose define connection inline. I'm gonna provide the base URL, which is going to be the following one. So this is basically the URL of my website. So I'm gonna just copy that one, put it right here. And in here, I'm gonna have the resource path. So just going to put this one. So basically, it's a folder, another folder, create user folder, another PHP file, which will be inserting basically when it's going to get the payload. So all this information, and it's going to take this data and then create a record into the database. Okay. So here I'm gonna choose post, and here I'm gonna just drag and drop payload data build. So we have to try here pretty much multiple times in order to make this thing work. Okay. Okay, perfect. So now what I want as well is parse the response. I do have in this PHP file, which is actually taking the data, creating user into the database, but as well have a response. Once it's created a user, I would like to send a response. Say the status code, it will be 200, the record is created. Invalid, status code 500, so on. So I want to have this response as well. I want to see it here in the flow designer when I'm going to make a test. Okay, the first thing here, I'm going to create two variables. The first one is going to be the status code. Okay, which I have the database right here, and the second one is going to be the response body. Okay, which I have here, and in here I'm going to put if inputs status code. So in the input that I have and the status code that I will have, if it is equal to 200, I mean in this case it's successful. That's how the code is written into the PHP file. And I'm gonna parse the response body. Okay, so I'm gonna create var response body. This is the variable we'll have all the data. So I'm gonna put here JSON parse, and here I'm gonna put inputs. We'll have the response body. So not the status code, response body. Okay, this is the first thing. And the next thing what we are going to do is having an output variable. So outputs message is the variable that I'm creating, and we'll have the message like the record is created. So the code that I wrote into the PHP file, like this one, have a response message which is record is created when it's successful. So I want to get that message. So it is stored on a specific variable that I'm going to mention here. It's going to be response body, and we're going to access it with this variable. Okay, status message. Okay, great. So perfect. So now what we are going to do is to create here message variable, which is going to be our output. Okay, save that one. And create our output here. It's going to be message. I would like to see that. Save it. Okay, so let's test now. So I'm gonna input some values here and then see if it is going to create a record in here in my database. So that's what we are going to try to do at this point. So I'm going here. I'll put, for example, shell, or this is going to be the user ID. First name is going to be Rochelle. Shell or at so.io. Let's do like this. Run test. Here. So I do have something wrong here. Response body is not defined. So let's go here. So I made a mistake. Okay, so the problem here, I was just wondering why it wasn't a different color here. This is proper now. I'm gonna save that one. Even though I didn't get the proper response message because I have made a letter mistake in here in the code, but I guess here the request was sent properly. So I'm gonna check here. Let's see if I have something. So as you can see here, Rachel Ramos, and I do have the user created with the password that I mentioned. As well, I have all the information: first name, last name, user ID, email, and the password. this is the first part that we have done. We have done the action step. We have made an outbound request now to create a user into the MySQL database. And now what we can do additionally is I can show you how we can create the flow which will be triggered whenever user created. Okay, so all we need to do is pretty simple from now is let's go back here, click on flow. I'm gonna create a flow and let's call it C365 and create user flow. Okay, I'm gonna name it like this. This is my flow. I'm gonna mention here select when you have to trigger this flow, when a record is created, in which table. It's going to be sys user table. Okay, so it's right here. So I'm going to click on done. That's the first part. Once we have a user record created, this flow will be triggered, and then we're going to add an action. In our case, we're going to add the action that we have just created. So I'm going to publish this one. So otherwise I cannot find it here. So if I click here action and then I go to global and what's the name, C365, I don't have nothing. So what I need to do at this point is to publish this one. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's add an action. It was more like this. Okay, as you can see here, this is our action. So I'm going to add that one. And you can see immediately we do have all the inputs variables: user ID, first name, last name, email, password. So here we have to mention that we are actually creating here whenever we create a record. So when a record is created, we do have all these fields available for us. So user record, we do have the for example, email, first name, last name, and so on. So we just need to drag and drop. So whenever we create a record, all this information that we have in the user record, we have to just drag and drop here, right here, the corresponding fields. So I should find out here the user ID. So let's find the user ID. So which is here. So user ID goes here. And then I'm going to do same thing, first name, and as well last name. What else? Email. Right here, and password right here. Okay. Okay, I do have all the information. I'm gonna click on done, double check, save, activate. Okay, so what we're going to do, I do have another flow which is actually basically allowing me to create the user whenever I'm clicking in this form, right? So I'm gonna deactivate that flow. So let me find that one. So here is going to be user, this one, which I temporarily I'm gonna deactivate, and we're gonna use the one that we have just created. Okay, so I'm gonna close everything. So I deactivated the flow which allowed me to, whenever I'm going to click on register to basically how to say trigger from here, get the user record and execute the action step and insert some and call the create user API, and finally we're gonna get the data inserted into the MySQL database. So I deactivated the one that I have created before, and now we are going to use the one that we have just created. Okay, the one which is this one. Okay, so which is activated now. So let's now create a user. I'm going here, user, click on new, and I put, for example, Henry. Okay, Henry A, Henry, last name, let's say Adams, something like this, password 256, and I'm going to put here Henry A at soak.io. That's it. Let's see if it's going to create now into the MySQL database if I'm going to have. So let's see what I have here. So for now I have Wayne and Rachel. I should have now the user that I have created in ServiceNow, which should be created as well in here. Okay, so let's go and test. And as you can see here, I do have the user created. As we created in ServiceNow directly, the password is encrypted. If I create from here, for example, I'm going back here, it won't be the case. So I'm going to just refresh the page and I'm going to create another person. Let's say Clogene. Let's put like this. I'm just finding around random names, and then I'm gonna put here year. Okay, this is going to be the last name. Let's put like this, and this is going to be the first name. Okay, and then I'm going to use this one here at soak.io, and I'm going to enter random password, click on register, and see what's going to happen. So let's go in here first, check if I have someone with the name Eugene. And as you can see here, I do have the information that I have entered in the form. So it's perfectly created in ServiceNow from here. And let's see here if I have something. And you can see here, I do have the same information, but the password is not encrypted. It's the one that I have entered into this field. Okay, so if you create the user directly from ServiceNow, it will be encrypted, but not from here. Okay, so this is how we can use Code365 here as a single entry point and store data in two different databases. Okay, so thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.